This October in Detroit, Dr. Natalie Luke and comedian Merit Kahn are bringing you a full day built around one question. What are you still carrying? And whose story convinced you that you had to? It's called Rewrite Your Story, an interactive workshop by day. Merit's hit comedy show, Optimistic Personality Disorder, live that night. You'll think, you'll laugh out loud, you'll live, you'll leave lighter. Early bird tickets are open now at UnCeilingZone.com. Unsealing, like the ceiling above your head.com/RWYS. Rewrite Your Story, Detroit this October. Welcome back to UnCeiling You. I'm Dr. Natalie Luke. And this show is about the invisible weight that lands on capable women and men at work and at home. What I call the trust tax, and how to name it, redesign it, and stop paying it without ever getting the credit. Today's guest is a little different from who you usually hear on this show. Merit Kahn is a comedian, speaker, and certified emotional intelligence expert who has lived through divorce, cancer, a couple of narcissists, and an empty nest, and turned it all into a one-woman comedy show called Optimistic Personality Disorder. I brought Merit on expecting to talk about rewriting your story. The whole conversation hearing my own work translated into a different language. She'd say something about the beliefs we inherit. I'd hear systems that hand people work nobody assigned them. She'd talk about people pleasing. I'd hear responsibility finding the person who's the easiest to give into it. By the end, it was obvious. We've been circling the same problem from two different directions. And that conversation is the reason Merit and I are now bringing something new to Detroit this October. A live event called Rewrite Your Story. You'll hear exactly what that is at the end of this episode. For now, here's my conversation with Merit Kahn. Hello, thank you so much for joining me on the UnCeiling You podcast. You've lived through divorce, cancer, narcissists, empty nesting, and your response to all of this was to write a comedy show. At what point did you think this can actually be funny?
Happily, I figured out pretty early. Before I actually got divorced, I took a stand-up comedy class, and my ex-husband now, who was still my husband at the time, was in the audience. And my first joke was, my husband is great, and he thinks so too. And so he and I laughed about it. At the end of that very first stand-up show I ever did, he said, "It's a good thing you have me in your life. I make you funny." Yeah. And that was the beginning of the end. But it was in the kind of comedy that I do is very personal comedy. So I write about what I know, which is my life, and the way that I observe myself handling things in my life. And that, as my marriage got more and more difficult and I was doing more writing about that, I was deliberately forcing myself to find the humor in it. And that was actually probably the best therapy I ever did.
Oh my gosh, I keep thinking to myself, man, I wish I could be funny. I feel so serious.
You can be. Anybody can be funny.
Well, speaking of funny, the term optimistic personality disorder, that title, that just statement is doing so much work. What does it mean to have an optimistic or optimism that looks like a disorder?
Well, first I should tell you, I've had many actual certified therapists see my one-woman show, Optimistic Personality Disorder, and they would like me to mention that it is not an official disorder. Although it has cost me dearly in my life to be a little too optimistic without a good dose of reality check to balance that out. But the concept came about, again, when I was writing about my relationship status. At this point, I was already divorced. And I remember writing in my journal about having to take him back to court because he didn't do what he said he was going to do, and all of that contempt of court issue. And I literally wrote out, I said, at the beginning of this process, I really thought that we would get through this divorce process and be amicable and it would be great. And then I thought, I'm not exactly sure why I thought we would get divorced well. When we were in love, the marriage didn't go well. Like, I think I'm the one with the problem. I think I have optimistic personality disorder, and the words just like jumped off the page at me, and all of a sudden my whole life made sense. So yeah, but it's fun to see my audiences relate to the title, and they know just from the title, okay, there's something for me here.
Yeah, I love that. And you're also a certified emotional intelligence expert.
Yes.
And most people think of EQ as being serious, empathetic, listening, self aware. But how does stand up comedy fit into all that?
Admittedly, I have been certified in emotional intelligence since 2018. So I have the trained eye. I understand at a clinical level what optimism is, as well as the 14 other emotional intelligence attributes that we can assess for. And I still do that work for businesses and leadership teams. And I love that work because there is a serious side. And the more you do understand the dynamics of optimism and self-regard and assertiveness and the real attributes that have a hardcore business application, the more it helps you find the funny. So let me unpack that a little bit. I'm actually also completing now my certification in positive psychology. So I'm not just a comedian who talks about optimism. I understand the dynamics of it. But I think at the core, my belief is that laughter lightens the load you hold. And so when you can loosen up, like we're all holding heavy things, right? And an emotional intelligence can be a heavy thing to unpack in yourself. When you really understand your own wiring, then you can make adjustments based on how you really show up in the world, how well you know yourself. And that gives you more choices. Well, laughter does the same thing. When you're holding on to something tightly, you're limited as to what else you can hold because you're so heavy and tightly wrapped around that one thing. But if you can lighten up, and laughter lightens us up, then you can hold more, right?
Yeah.
If things are lighter, you can hold more of them. And so I think that when you understand the psychology of humor and you can bring that into the workplace as well, it really does a great service to reducing stress among teams and among yourself so that you can really deal with the things that are happening in your life, the realities that may not all be funny.
Yeah. I could see that. I could see that for sure, especially in various teams that I work on and have worked on. So your show is also built on the idea that you can rewrite your past, but basically the past has already happened. So what does it really mean to rewrite the past?
Well, it's so interesting. And I have done a lot of study on narcissists. So having had a couple of different relationships with them. What narcissists do, well, they will rewrite the facts of their past. So that's somebody with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. Somebody with OPD, optimistic personality disorder. We're not rewriting the facts. We're rewriting our relationship to them.
Okay.
So the facts still remain in your past. We're not changing the facts of your past, but we're giving you more agency over your future when you control the narrative of your past. And you can lighten that up. So yes, I was married to a narcissist for 17 years. Yes, it was a very difficult relationship. He had unrelenting standards, a term I learned from our therapist. And I could relate to all of that like, woe's me, I had this horrible relationship, and because of this, I will never achieve my blah, blah, blah. Oh, my Lord. Instead, I write comedy about it. I say things like, my ex was in therapy and his therapist called him a classic narcissist. And he came back from that appointment. He goes, babe, she said I'm a classic. Like, that's the word you picked out of that sentence? Like, what? So I choose to laugh about it. I didn't rewrite that he was or wasn't who he was, but I rewrote my relationship to that. And honestly, I'm also poking a lot of fun at myself, right? It's not just, I had this experience and this person had this, it's truly a mental disorder. I'm not I'm not trying to make him the bad guy about it. What I'm doing is I'm observing myself, observing that relationship.
Mm.
And that's where the humor comes in. It's in that gap between reality and your expectation of it.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. So one of the things, and I like the fact that you're talking about controlling the narrative in your own life, not just the past, but what's going on now, observing yourself. In my work, I talk about the trust tax, and that's the invisible cost from being relied on in a system that was never, where things just kind of fall in your lap, but it's not really assigned to you, but you pick it up and that sort of thing. So I'm curious, do you think some of the stories we carry about ourselves are actually handed to us in the past or by systems or by organizations, families, relationships?
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. In fact, in my work, I talk about what I actually call hand-me-down beliefs. It's, sometimes it's very clear to us where we get our hand-me-down beliefs. Like you've probably heard as a child, you heard your parents say something like, money doesn't grow on trees, or we don't talk about money in mixed company, or whatever it is, right? You might have some money beliefs. And then, like, let's say, you grew up with, we don't talk about money. And then you find yourself in a sales job. It's like, well, I kind of have to talk about money. Like, I'm running a company, I'm doing budgets, like money is a thing. I actually have to talk about it. So those beliefs that were handed down to you in your young years may not serve you moving forward in your future. Very simple one, like at some point young, we all decided like a certain amount of money was a lot of money. And then you grow up and you're like, I like nice things. That was a lot of money for a poor college student going to quarter draft nights, but that is not a lot of money for somebody running a family and wants to live in a nice, location and go on a vacation and all of those things. So you have to readjust your beliefs about what is a lot of money. So to hand-me-down beliefs, I say, let's look at some of those beliefs that you had just handed to you, kind of like that sweater that you got handed down from your cousin and it never really quite fits you right.
Yeah.
Well, you could hand it back, so when you look at something as an adult, you get a choice. I call it redecide. You get an opportunity to make a new decision, redecide on any of the beliefs that you had, because they may not be the ones that are going to get you where you want to go. My position is just because you've had a belief longer than a new belief you want to install doesn't mean it's the true one.
Right.
There's no guarantee that one belief is more true than the other. So if you look at them and say, this belief no longer serves me, you could just write a new one and start believing it. Like, it's not that deep. You may have to train yourself a little bit, but why isn't that one the truth? Why is it the old one that you've had for a long time the truth? It's not.
Before we keep going, I want you to notice something. Merit just described a belief that outlived its usefulness and pointed out that I've had this longer isn't the same as this is true. That's her language for something I've talked about consistently, just from the other side. I called it the trust tax. The cost of being the person everything gets routed to, whether or not you've ever agreed to carrying it. Merit calls it the hand-me-down belief, a rule you never chose that just showed up in your hands one day. Same weight, different name. I'm not going to resolve that for you right now. I just want you to sit with it for a second before we move on, because once you can see that the story and the system are feeding each other, you can't really unsee it. Okay, back to the interview. So you've been training sales teams long before the comedy show. What did decades of sales teach you about storytelling that made you a better performer?
Well, absolutely. I learned know your audience. I learned that from sales. You have to really listen. So in sales, it's important to you want to sell to somebody who is able and willing to buy, somebody who has the pain that your product or service is the solution to. And what that means in, how that relates to comedy is you want it to be relatable. So, for example, the one time I super bombed on a comedy stage, I mean, not little bit bomb, like super bomb. And they say if you're not a real comedian until you've had that experience. So I'm happy to say I'm a real comedian. I was in Toronto, Canada. I was there for actually a work function, and it was very new in my stand-up career. And I all of my jokes were about my horrible marriage, hadn't started dating yet. And so the time slot I got in this club was about 10:30 p.m. on a Wednesday night in downtown Toronto, right? So
Wow.
I'm in Canada where everybody's super nice. So keep that in mind.
Oh.
Who's at the comedy club at Wednesday at 10:30 at night? Not the married people who relate to divorce jokes, okay? It's a bunch of young 20-somethings who just got off their own shift, who are waiting for their turn to go up at the comedy club and all of that in Canada. So I'm up there. My jokes are completely unrelatable to this audience. I didn't have enough material to go, oh, I'm going to do my dating set. Oh, this is a young audience. I'm going to do this material. Oh, this is a female audience. They're going to love these jokes.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have enough to adjust my approach. And literally there are two women sitting front row center, and I am mid set, and I hear one of them say to the other, she's a little mean. And she was right. My jokes, an American doing divorce jokes on a Wednesday night in Canada. Yes, they were mean jokes. And so completely unrelatable. So that was sales lesson number one. And it dawned on me afterwards, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, well, this is not my audience. And it just didn't land. So I think relatability is an important thing in sales and in comedy. And then I think, so just really know your audience. I think that's a good lesson.
Yeah, that is a wonderful lesson, and the listening part as well. And it's kind of hard to listen while you're actually performing, I would imagine.
The listening part, so yes, and that's a great point as well. Like, a key principle and one of my favorite things to teach when I still do some sales team work, and I speak at a lot of conferences, and sometimes they'll invite me in to do a Think Like a Comedian workshop program, and sometimes it's more sales related, and sometimes it's a nice hybrid. But one of my favorite things to teach is questioning techniques, so that and the whole purpose of asking better questions is to get better information back. So how that relates to comedy, you could say, yes, you're asking questions of the audience. You've seen comedians do crowd work is what it's called. And there's certain comedians that have made entire careers just out of their crowd work. Matt Rife is well known for his crowd work. But for a lot of comedians, the questions come before what you see on stage. So if I'm testing my material and my material's relatability to an audience, I'm going to ask questions of the people that are most like the audiences I want to serve. So most of my audiences, I perform stand-up across the country with a group called Moms Unhinged. And it's all mom comedians. And there's like 30 of us. So all the casts are different. We travel the country. You can come to 12 different Moms Unhinged shows and get a bunch of different comedians every time. It's really great. 95% of our audiences are moms, right? So it's kind of humorous. We literally count the men that show up in the audience. And my one-woman show is a little bit the same, although I have quite a few more men that come to my audience, mostly because the word has gotten out that I say to the women in my audience, if you brought your husband to this show, please sleep with him tonight. Like, he came to a show about a woman's life story. Like, that deserves sex. So now men are coming to my show like, how did you find out about this? But so the questions come first, and I will ask women, like, this was my experience. Did you have an experience like this? And now I'm listening. And if multiple people are having experiences like the one I'm writing a joke about, then I know I've got something relatable.
Nice.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You know that feeling when you've been carrying something for so long, you can't even fathom putting this thing down? This October in Detroit, Dr. Natalie H and comedian Merit Kahn are bringing that feeling into one room and giving it somewhere to go. It's called Rewrite Your Story, a full day built around one idea. You can't put something down until you understand both why it landed on you and the story you've been telling yourself about why you have to keep holding it. The day starts with a live workshop, real tools, real laughter, the two of them working through it with you, not at you. Then that night, it all comes to life on stage when Merit performs her one-woman show, Optimistic Personality Disorder. The show people have called a TED Talk and a tequila shot's love child. You'll learn something. You'll laugh. probably harder than you expected to. And you'll leave with a different relationship to everything you've been carrying. One ticket, a full day, a room full of people ready to put something down. Rewrite your story. This October in Detroit. Early bird tickets are open now. Get yours at UnCeiling Zone, like the ceiling above your head, UnCeiling zone.com/RWYS. Now, I have to ask you, why do you think women struggle to give themselves permission to like reset? Because you're talking about essentially resetting. And what was it for you the moment you finally gave that permission to yourself?
Well, I don't think I'm alone in this, but many women have a people-pleasing aspect to them. And that is very dangerous. It made me pray for PREY for emotional abusive relationships.
Yeah.
Where I was taken for granted, and I like serving others. I enjoy being useful and making everybody around me happy. But I started to notice when more of those kinds of emotional predators were showing up in my life, in personal and business, that I was losing myself. So I think that, we need to give ourselves permission to do a reset. And what helped me a great deal is I have always believed that there's 4 main pillars in life. And this is, as a mother, where I discovered this was, just trying to teach my kid, and I have one son, he's 22 and graduating college in 2 days. Oh my God.
Yay.
But for boys, you have to make it simple, okay? The fewer words you can use to get to the point that you really want them to remember, the better. So I would tell my son, there's 4 things I need you to know. Be good with your body, be good with your money, be good with people, and know what brings you joy, bliss, right? So those 4 things. So I do resets, 90-day resets, and actually I'm starting to offer, I was just doing them selfishly for myself. And then the more I started talking about it, more and more women especially were coming to me and saying like, I want to do that reset with you. So now I'm starting to offer them like these virtual reset tours on all 4 categories, not all at once, but I'll do a 90-day reset. And the formula is the first 30 days, we're just gathering data. So if we're doing a 90-day health reset, I use Function Health to do a battery of blood work. I get my body fat tested. I look at what I'm eating. I track my sleep. I'm, I'm just gathering data to get a baseline. Where am I? What's the reality of where I'm at? Not good, not bad, not right, not wrong, just the truth.
Measure.
The next 30 days is about alignment. So then you look at all the data and you say, okay, where are my force multipliers? Well, if I slept better, I'd probably make better decisions eating and working out, and I'd have more energy. Okay, let's fix sleep. And then, whatever else there is. And then the final 30 days is tracking and really like paying attention. How does my body feel? And what my mind is part of health and body. So in 90 days, you can reset a whole lot.
Wow.
And so then I just repeat that. And the first one I ever did was with money. And it was right after my divorce. And I was just like, okay, total money reset. And I read a book. It was called, it's still called The Energy of Money by something Nemeth. I'm forgetting her first name. But it was very, very good. And it was a complete reset. And she just said, get a handle on where your money goes and how much you got. And so that kind of gave me the formula that I followed for building my resets in the other areas. And it's been a great journey, and you can reset a lot in 90 days.
Quick pause, because what Merit just walked through is bigger than money. She resets her beliefs. I reset responsibility. Here's how those 2 things are actually the same move. A belief like, if I can fix it, I should, doesn't just sit there quietly. It goes to work. It's the thing deciding in real time what you pick up. Is it, are you company outcome, someone's feelings, a task nobody assigned to you. The belief comes first. The overload is just what it looks like once it's running unchecked. So here's your reset, and it takes under 5 minutes. Think of one thing you're currently carrying, then sort it into one of 3 buckets. Is it actually your role? Is it an outcome you can influence but don't control? Or is it someone else's feelings, reactions, or follow-through that somehow ended up in your hands? Only the first one is fully yours. Don't fix anything yet. Just sort it. Name which bucket it is. Everything else comes later. Back to the interview.
Yeah, and just think of it. 90 days, that's 4 quarters. And in a year, things can be a lot different.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that's the core. Like when you really focus on the foundational things, especially for a people pleaser type of persona, you are pleasing yourself. You are focused, rightly so, on something that is good for you. And actually, it helps you become better for everyone around you anyway, because you're shoring yourself up in one of those 4 ways. So I think I just think it's something that is valuable for everybody, no matter what stage of the game you're in. Just pick one of those areas.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful plan. If someone we're not to the end yet, but later on we'll talk about if someone wanted to join you on a reset, how to do that. I was curious also to know, like, has there ever been a night or any show where audience reaction just stopped you, where you thought, this is exactly why I do this?
Absolutely. I've definitely had moments during the show when I've thought, okay, like I feel it. There's a very tender moment in the show. It's revealing and it's personal, and people really resonate with it, whether or not they've had a similar experience. But it's the conversations that happen at the end of the show. You know, a lot of times people are like, oh, that was great. You know, you see a comedy show, you're like, that was great. And you're out of there. You're in the parking lot as fast as you can, on to the next thing. People linger after my show. First of all, I always do what's called in the business a talk back. Are you a Carol Burnett fan by any chance?
Yes.
Okay. So remember when watching her show and she would do like that audience chit chat thing? She would do it before her sitcom. So I do that with my audiences because she's one of my idols. And I just think what a great opportunity. I want to know what resonated with my audiences. I want to know what questions they are left with at the end of watching basically my entire life story with very little filter. And it's amazing to me the questions they ask. They ask about my son. They ask about, producing a tour on my own. They ask about, what other shows I might be writing. But it's just like we're buddies. And even in my ticketing platform, I get their phone numbers and I call people after my show. And it's hilarious because I'll say like, hey, it's Merit. You just saw my show. You're calling me? Yeah.
I would have that reaction like,
right?
Really?
Yeah, I'm sure that when you went to see Hamilton, the actors called you to find out how you enjoyed the show. And they're like, no, this has never happened. And I'm like, well, because what I tell them at the end of the show is, basically the show is organized around the 5 decades of my life. So I wrote it for my 50th birthday, and technically I'm in decade 6. I'm 56 years old now. And so I have to keep writing the new piece. But I asked them, I named each of my decades. And then I asked them at the end of the show, what are you naming your next decade? And what are you naming this next year? And in my show, I named them in reverse. So we're looking back at my life story and seeing like how it all came together and the lessons that I've learned. But now what I've discovered, and I got this actually from a conversation with an audience member. It was somebody in the audience who first said, well, what are you calling the next decade? And that's when I learned, why don't we name them in advance? Then we live into it. And so I always call my audiences. So if you come see my show, you can prepare yourself. You're going to get a phone call. I want to know what you're naming your next decade. I want to know, is there some way I can support you? Not a sales call, but like, how can I help? I'm here. And thank you for coming to see a show by a woman you've never heard of, to see a show you've never heard of. Like, that means something,
Yeah.
That's a big thing.
Well, okay, so go have fun and pay attention. So, just for the person that is driving right now who's stuck in a chapter of their life where they feel like they didn't choose, what's the smallest possible thing that they can do today to start rewriting for them?
Well, I think the number one thing is right. What you see on a comedy stage is the very end of the process. What you don't see is the most valuable part. And that was at some point, a comedian observed something. They were frustrated about something. And I'm not saying this for all comedy, but certainly my comedy, they noticed something. And then they noticed that they noticed it. And then they ask themselves questions. What's funny about that? What's embarrassing about that? And so if you're in a phase of life and things feel heavy, grab a piece of paper and a pen, not a typewriter and not a keyboard typewriter. How old am I? Not a laptop, but an actual piece of paper, because there's a connection with your brain and your hand, and write out, because you will discover things about what you think when you read them on the page. You will write them before you know you think it. And when that happens, look at it and go, okay, what's funny about that? What could possibly be funny about that? And keep writing and you will find it. And if you don't find it, come take my Think Like a Comedian class and I'll teach you how to do it.
Before we close this out, I want to leave you with something a little sharper. Merit said something a few minutes ago, and I don't want you to gloss over it. You'll write the truth on paper before you consciously know you think about it. So here's the question, not how do you feel if you said no to the next thing that lands on your desk? I mean the real version. What would actually happen if you said no? Not the story you tell yourself about what would happen, the actual concrete consequence. Most people can't answer that question cleanly. And the gap between what you assume will happen and what will really happen is exactly where the trust tax lives. And if that question made you uncomfortable, good. That's the one worth sitting with. And if you want to see exactly where you land, I built a free assessment for this. It only takes about 5 minutes and it'll tell you which stage of the cascade you're actually in. Links in the show notes. The Trust Tax Diagnostics. Okay, let's close this episode out. Awesome. So where can we find out more about your stand-up comedies, everything that you have to offer, your 90-day reset, all of it?
The 90-day resets are brand new, so hopefully by the time this episode comes out, I'll have it all nicely on the website. But the best way to find me, you can go to Merit Kahn, MERITKAHN. I'm Merit Kahn on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I have meritkahn.com. That's more of my business and speaker side, so you can see the different programs I do for business. If you want to learn about the show, Mystic Personality Disorder, you can go to opdshow.com. And there's always a little button at the top and it says, let's talk. Just click the button. You can book 15 minutes, 30 minutes on my calendar. If you want to talk, let's talk. Yeah, the tour schedule is on there, all the things.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on UnCeiling You. I really appreciate you. I'm glad that you joined us. So now you know the backstory. There was no whiteboard for this, no planning session where Merit and I decided to build something together. There was just a conversation. And somewhere in the middle of it, two bodies of work that has been circling around the same problem finally looked at each other. I've been asking, what are people carrying and how has it gotten handed to them? Merit has been asking, what story keeps them picking it up again? Put those together and you get somewhere neither one of us can get to alone. That's rewrite your story. Here's exactly what it is. A full day built to do both. It starts with a live workshop, Merit and I in a room together, physically in a room together, working through the mindset and the systems side by side with the kind of real talk and laughter that makes it stick instead of just sounding good. Then that evening,
Everyone in the room gets to watch it all land on stage when Merit performs Optimistic Personality Disorder live. It's 1 ticket, 2 experiences, the thinking and the transformation, then the laughing and the release. We're bringing it to Detroit this October. Early bird tickets are open now, and if you've got 6 or more people you want to come together, there's a group rate too. All the details, the date, the venue, the tickets are in the link in the show notes. I'll see you next time on UnCeiling You.
Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate it.